We've just got some breaking news in from Buckingham Palace, folks. So this statement has just come in from Buckingham Palace, and I'll read it for you. It goes on to say, His Majesty has today initiated a formal process to remove the style, titles, and...
The room had been prepared for a quiet examination of royal jewels, not a family rupture. But the moment the jewelers delivered their conclusion, every controlled emotion threatened to break loose. Diana's sapphire set, surrounded by memory, symbolism, and competing expectations, had been designated for Prince George in this dramatized scenario. Harry heard the words, stared across the room, and within minutes walked out, leaving William facing a crisis far larger than jewelry. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Harry stayed frozen, his hands still, his expression unreadable. Across from him, William watched the specialists, sensing that the meeting had moved beyond authentication. The Sapphire suite, the matching group of jewels centered on the same stones and design, had been brought to Windsor so experts could confirm its origin, catalog marks, and intended custody. For both brothers, that mattered, because these were not ordinary valuables. They were tied to Diana, Princess of Wales, and every decision involving them touched grief neither son had completely escaped. The senior jeweler spoke with precision. The identifying marks, inventory, and private family instructions all pointed in the same direction. Diana's sapphire set had been designated to pass to George, not Harry. The words landed without ceremony. Harry looked toward William and asked one question. "Did you know?" The prince hesitated. It was only a second, but that second changed everything. Harry's face tightened, because silence felt like confirmation, while William understood that any answer could sound like betrayal. Harry pushed his chair back. The scrape cut through the room, and even the jewelers stopped speaking. He told William he could not continue, then turned toward the door. The future king called his brother's name once, quietly. Harry did not turn. He walked out, and the door closed behind him with the weight of years neither brother had settled. William remained seated as the specialists continued. Their conclusion had not come from whoever possessed the pieces. It came from catalog references, craftsmanship records, and a documented fictional instruction preserved with Diana's collection. Then came the detail he had not expected. George could not simply take possession now. The sapphires carried a condition tied to a stage of responsibility, suggesting Diana had imagined not only who would receive them, but when. That possibility shook William more deeply than Harry's exit. If the instruction reached that far ahead, then the choice had not been casual. Harry had left the room, but the reason George's name appeared at the center of Diana's sapphire legacy would force both brothers to confront memories they had spent years trying to keep separate. For William and Harry, nothing connected to Diana could ever be merely an object. Every photograph, handwritten note, jewel, and memory carried a piece of a childhood violently interrupted. That is why the sapphire decision cuts deeper than questions of wealth. William sees George as the next generation carrying Diana's bloodline forward. Harry sees something else, a painful reminder that the royal future continues without him at its center, even when the subject is his own mother. Harry stood alone after leaving the meeting, but the anger that carried him through the door was changing shape. Diana, Princess of Wales, remained more than a public figure to both sons. She was the mother they lost before adulthood, and possessions linked to her had become anchors for memory and belonging. Prince George, third in line to the throne in this dramatized account, was not part of the argument, yet his position connected grief to monarchy. William turned to Catherine because he needed someone who understood both sides of the wound. During their private conversation, the prince admitted that protecting George's inheritance could sound to Harry like protecting the institution that had always stood between them. Catherine listened carefully. She knew William was not celebrating. He was trying to defend his son without making his brother feel pushed outside the family. Harry pressed one hand against the table and stared down. His frustration had stopped being about ownership. What frightened him was the possibility that Diana herself had intended the sapphire set for William's branch, and that thought cut deeper than losing any jewel. If the choice had been deliberate, he had to face a painful question. Had his mother imagined the future in a way that left him beyond its center? Catherine finally asked what William had been avoiding. What if Diana had seen the sapphires not as a personal gift, but as part of a future royal role? William did not answer immediately. A royal role means the public duty carried by a working member of the monarchy, and that distinction changed the inheritance. The set might not represent preference. It might represent purpose. William then revealed, through the jeweller's documented account, that another sealed inventory entry was connected to the collection. An inventory entry is an official record listing an object, its history, and intended handling. He had not seen what this sealed record contained, but its existence suggested Diana's jewelry had been divided with greater care than either understood. That possibility shifted everything. The storm at Windsor did not begin with the jeweller's announcement. It began months before, with one conversation that made palace officials realize Diana's sapphires could become a family fault line. Months before Harry walked out, the sapphire set had already caused an uncomfortable silence inside the family. It happened during what should have been an ordinary private discussion about preserving Diana's personal possessions for the next generation. One question was asked. One answer changed the atmosphere. And from that moment forward, William knew that whatever happened to those jewels would never be treated as simple inheritance. Someone would feel that something precious had been taken away. William had approached the review cautiously from the beginning. In this dramatized account, several items connected to Diana were being reconsidered as the younger royals grew older, and questions emerged about stewardship, ceremonial use, and inheritance. Stewardship simply meant who would be responsible for protecting and preserving an object over time. The prince insisted that no jewel linked to his mother should become a trophy in an argument between adults. For him, preserving Diana's memory mattered more than winning control of any collection. Harry heard something different whenever officials spoke about keeping historically important pieces close to the direct succession line. That phrase meant the branch of the family expected to inherit the throne, and to him it carried an old sting. He feared that royal hierarchy was once again being placed above personal bonds. William rejected that interpretation. He believed that allowing certain pieces to remain connected to George protected Diana's place inside the monarchy's future, rather than pushing his brother outside it. The tension finally broke during a private family meeting at Windsor. A senior jewelry curator asked whether Diana's sapphire suite should be provisionally listed under George's future holdings. A provisional listing is a temporary record used until the final documentation is confirmed. Harry turned immediately toward William. Was this already decided? He asked. The future king answered carefully. The original documentation had to determine it. Harry did not argue further, but his expression hardened. William knew the conversation had crossed a line neither brother could easily uncross. The curator left that meeting unsettled and later examined the pieces again. During that review, the specialist found an old catalog reference engraved in the records for one sapphire piece, linking it to a separate sealed inventory entry. The discovery was preserved in a documented account of the examination. Suddenly, preference no longer mattered. The question was becoming one of historical instruction, and neither brother understood how much that reference would cost. That discovery led straight toward the jeweler's later examination, and the verdict that shattered the room. Once the paperwork and craftsmanship pointed toward George, emotion collided with evidence, and Harry returned to demand an answer from the one person he believed had known more than he admitted. Harry did not stay away for long. Anger had carried him out of the room, but unanswered questions pulled him back. When he found William privately, there were no jewelers between them. no advisors to soften the language, and nowhere for either brother to hide. Harry asked the question that had been burning since the announcement. Did William already know George would inherit the sapphires? The answer would determine whether this was grief or betrayal. Harry closed the door behind him and faced his brother. In this dramatized account, the jewelry had become secondary. What mattered now was whether decisions had been made without him. William knew George's name had appeared in preliminary records, meaning early documents that had not yet been fully verified. The prince explained that specialists were brought in because he refused to treat an uncertain entry as settled fact. Harry listened, but the explanation did little to soften him. Harry stepped closer and asked the question again. "Did you know his name was there before I walked into that room?" William answered yes. Then he added that he had not known the jewelers would confirm the entire sapphire set. The future king tried to separate suspicion from certainty, but Harry heard only the admission. To him, the silence before the meeting now felt deliberate. William had known something, and he had said nothing. William's restraint finally cracked. He told Harry that warning him about an unconfirmed record could have looked like an attempt to shape the outcome before the experts had finished their work. Harry fired back. That respect for process meant little when one brother entered the room prepared and the other did not. The argument stopped being about jewels. It became about trust, old wounds, and the fear that royal procedure had once again been placed between them. William then revealed, through the jeweler's documented account, that George's designation had been written long before the boy could understand what the sapphires meant. That detail changed the air. Someone had planned for Diana's legacy to move forward by generation, not simply sideways between her sons. Harry's anger sharpened into disbelief. Harry demanded every record connected to the collection. William agreed, but warned him that one sealed instruction remained unopened. A sealed instruction is a preserved written direction kept closed until a specific condition allows it to be examined. Its wording could settle not only who held the sapphires, but why Diana's collection had been divided that way. Their anger could no longer change the record. So the brothers turned toward the machinery behind it, and discovered that the real power had been sitting quietly inside an old custodial arrangement for years. Royal families may argue over memory, but jewels obey records, inventories, custody rules, and written instructions. That reality becomes impossible to ignore when William and Harry learn that neither brother can simply claim the sapphire set by force of emotion. In this dramatized story, the decision is protected by a chain of custodianship created to prevent exactly this kind of dispute. And when Charles sees the file for himself, even the king realizes that family authority has limits. Charles read the relevant file alone, and then set it down without speaking. The custodial structure around Diana's designated jewelry was deliberately layered. Catalogers recorded each piece. Executors protected written wishes. Jewelers verified identity, and family representatives guarded continuity. An executor is a person responsible for carrying out written instructions after someone dies. That separation mattered, because it stopped any one relative from quietly changing where a valuable piece was meant to go. The king understood immediately that stepping in for either son could deepen the wound. William entered expecting answers, but the monarch gave him a warning instead. George could not be used as a weapon in an argument between brothers. The prince agreed, yet the burden was obvious. Protecting his son's future claim might look, to Harry, like choosing succession over family. Charles knew that was the danger. The sapphire set carried more than sentimental value, because the fictional documentation also linked it to future ceremonial use, meaning it could one day be worn or presented during formal royal duties. That made the dispute harder to treat as a private family disagreement. Harry then received the custodian's decision through a documented account prepared after the review. No living family member, they confirmed, had unilateral authority to redirect the sapphire set while the original instruction remained valid. Unilateral authority simply means the power to act alone without needing anyone else's approval. The message was devastating because it removed the last hope that persuasion, anger, or pressure might change the outcome. William could not hand the sapphires over. Charles could not rewrite the destination. Harry was no longer fighting a brother. He was facing a record. The sealed instruction contained one more blow. George would not receive the collection immediately. The pieces were to remain untouched until the designated recipient reached a specified stage of royal responsibility, tying inheritance to duty rather than age alone. William recognized the significance at once, while Harry recognized something more painful. The arrangement had been built to survive disagreement. That realization changed the emotional balance. Once Harry understood that persuasion would not change the destination, his anger lost its target, and what replaced it was something quieter, heavier, and far more personal. The loudest moment has already happened. Now comes the more painful one. Harry no longer has a room to storm out of, or a brother to confront. The documents have spoken within this dramatized narrative. The custodians will not move, and George's name remains attached to Diana's sapphires. Left alone with that reality, Harry begins to understand that his anger was covering something older, the fear that time is carrying his mother further away from him. Charles moved quickly to contain the damage. He instructed those around the family that no one was to frame the decision as a victory for William or a defeat for Harry. The king understood why that mattered. Once an inheritance dispute becomes a contest, every gesture starts looking like triumph or humiliation. William agreed and went further. George was to remain completely outside the argument. The boy had never met Diana, and his father refused to let adults debate whether he deserved something connected to a grandmother he knew only through stories. Harry sat alone and reached into his pocket for a small keepsake linked to his mother. His anger softened almost immediately. In a private recorded conversation preserved for this fictional account, he admitted what had really wounded him. The Sapphire decision made him feel shut out of a memory he believed belonged equally to both brothers. For Harry, the pain was no longer about ownership. It was about whether time, duty, and succession were slowly carrying Diana into a future where he felt less present. William struggled with guilt of his own. Catherine reminded him that respecting a documented wish was not the same as choosing one sibling over another. A documented wish means a preserved written instruction showing how someone wanted property or personal items handled. Still, the prince feared Harry would remember only one brutal fact. George received what he did not. Catherine urged him not to let that fear turn into defensiveness. Then the record shifted everything again. Harry learned through the custodian's documented account that the sapphire set was only one part of a wider distribution. Other personal pieces had been separated among different descendants instead of being concentrated within William's branch. One entry carried Harry's own name. He was not told what the object was, only that Diana had preserved something specifically for him and his children. That discovery did not erase the hurt, but it changed its direction. For the first time since the dispute began, Harry had a reason to stop fighting the decision, and a reason to sit across from William without anyone else in the room. Now the brothers would have to decide whether memory could survive their anger. There is no audience when William and Harry meet again. No specialists, no courtiers, no files spread across a polished table. Just two brothers carrying the same loss in different ways. The argument over sapphires has exposed years of resentment, but it has also stripped away the excuses surrounding them. Harry finally says what the confrontation was truly about. William listens, and for once, neither man tries to win before the other has finished speaking. William had arranged the meeting without aides because he knew anything filtered through palace machinery would feel cold and procedural. An aide is a member of royal staff who helps manage duties, schedules, and official matters, But this conversation could not be managed. Harry arrived guarded yet calmer. He already knew the Sapphire designation would stand. There was nothing left to overturn, which meant the brothers finally had to speak about what the decision had touched beneath the argument. Harry told William that hearing George's name attached to Diana's sapphires had made him feel as though their mother's legacy was being absorbed entirely into the monarchy's future. The thought had frightened him more than he wanted to admit. William answered quietly that one inherited collection could never erase Harry's place as Diana's son. George might one day safeguard the jewels, he said, but he could never inherit the memories that belonged to the two brothers who had actually known her. William then admitted something of his own. Every decision involving their mother seemed to become another test of whether they still saw themselves as brothers before they saw themselves through titles, duties, and old grievances. Harry did not interrupt. The prince confessed that he feared even a careful decision could become another reason for separation. For once, Harry understood that his brother was not defending victory. He was trying to stop grief from becoming another permanent border between them. William placed the separate inventory record before Harry. An inventory record is a formal written entry showing what an item is, where it belongs, and how it should be handled. The documented account described a smaller, deeply personal object preserved specifically for Harry's family. It did not carry the public weight of the sapphires. That was precisely why it mattered. Diana's fictional plan had not chosen one son over another. It had preserved different parts of her legacy for different futures. Harry did not apologize for being hurt. He did admit that directing that hurt toward George had been wrong. William, in turn, accepted that he should have warned his brother before the jewelers spoke. The brothers may finally understand each other, but beyond palace walls, the sapphire set is already becoming a symbol, and the public is about to decide what that symbol means. By morning, a private family wound has become a national conversation. The public does not see the quiet second meeting between William and Harry. It sees one explosive image and words: Diana's sapphires destined for George, followed by Harry walking out. Suddenly the jewelry is being debated as if it represents the entire future of the monarchy. Inheritance, hierarchy, motherhood, memory, and the painful distance between two brothers whose private grief has never remained completely private. William reads the coverage with growing frustration. Palace Communications, meaning the official team that explains royal matters to the public, tries to keep the focus on historical stewardship rather than rivalry. In this dramatized account, officials stress that the sapphire arrangement comes from long-standing instructions, not a fresh decision made against Harry. That distinction matters because George had no role in the dispute, yet his name is suddenly everywhere. The prince fears his son is being turned into a symbol before he is old enough to understand why. Harry reacts just as sharply when commentators reduce the story to jealousy. He has already accepted, in private, that the sapphires will remain tied to George, and he resents seeing his hurt presented as a fight over expensive stones. For him, the argument was always about Diana, memory, and whether one branch of the family was being allowed to carry more of her legacy than the other. William understands that pain now, but the public does not know what the brothers said behind closed doors. Outside Kensington Palace, a small crowd gathers near the gates, while broadcasters debate what the inheritance means. One fictional newspaper front page shows a large sapphire blue image beside the headline, "Diana's legacy passes to George." The phrase catches instantly, because it turns a private arrangement into a public verdict. Some commentators describe the designation as continuity through Diana's eldest grandson. Others argue that attaching family memory to succession risks making grief look like hierarchy. Then the palace issues a careful clarification. George will not receive the sapphire set immediately. The jewels will remain protected until he reaches the stage of royal responsibility specified in the original custodial instructions, meaning the written rules governing when and how the pieces may pass to him. That statement cools claims of an instant transfer, but it cannot erase the emotional force of the story. That gap between private understanding and public interpretation becomes the final danger, because reconciliation can survive disagreement, but struggle under a story neither brother fully recognizes. The headlines eventually fade, but inside the family, the true verdict is not written by newspapers, jewelers, or palace officials. It is written by what William and Harry choose to do next. In the end, nobody truly wins Diana's sapphires. George may be their designated future custodian in this fictional account, but the jewels do not make him more loved, more important, or more connected to the grandmother he never met. Harry's anger does not make him selfish. William's acceptance does not make him triumphant. What the confrontation exposes is simpler and more painful. Grief can survive for decades, and beautiful objects can become vessels for everything a family never learned to say. Harry accepts the decision with a calm he could not find when the argument began. The custodial instruction remains unchanged. Diana's sapphire set stays protected for George until he reaches the stage of royal responsibility. A custodial instruction is a written direction explaining who must safeguard an item and when it may pass to another person. That matters because the arrangement is not a reward for one branch of the family. It is part of a fictional plan that separates personal pieces across generations, instead of placing everything in one line. William meets his brother before Harry leaves, and neither man tries to reopen the fight. The prince tells him that George will one day be taught why the sapphires mattered to Diana, not simply what they were worth. Harry listens, then answers with force. The boy should also be told about the woman behind the title, the mother who laughed, worried, protected, and loved. William understands. The jewels can carry history, but they cannot carry the whole person. Harry's acceptance becomes the turning point. He recognizes that George receiving the set does not weaken his bond with his mother, because memory is not divided like property. His anger had been real, but beneath it was grief. The fear that Diana was being pulled further into the monarchy's future and further away from him. William recognizes his responsibility too. He decides that George must never inherit the rivalry along with the sapphires. That decision closes the wound without pretending it never existed. George receives responsibility. William accepts duty. Harry leaves with something no catalog, jeweler, or palace record can grant or remove. Certainty that his place in Diana's life cannot be transferred. The door Harry once slammed behind him no longer defines the ending. What defines it is what both brothers choose afterward. Diana's sapphires may pass to George, but her memory belongs to neither branch of the family alone. Inheritance can decide who safeguards an object. It cannot decide who owns a memory, and that is where the conflict finally ends. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.